So in this video I'm going to be breaking down why I think Gary Neville is wrong about the Solskjaer Manchester United situation and sacking managers in general. And as always, for cheap good quality football jerseys, retro jerseys and tracksuits, go over to www.jerseyfifa.com, a link will be left in the description, and if you use code ATLANTISFOOTBALL you'll get 5% off. So in the aftermath of Manchester United's humiliating 5-0 defeat at home to Liverpool, Jamie Carragher, Gary Neville and some of the other Sky Sports pundits were discussing the current crisis at Manchester United. It's fair to say that Jamie Carragher had a more blunt, negative view of Solskjaer's management at Manchester United, whereas Gary Neville seemed to be giving all the arguments to suggest that he thinks that Solskjaer should be sacked, but he came to a different conclusion to everyone else.
Too close to give up now, Gary. Do you think they are close to achieving anything?
I don't think they're close to winning the league. I don't think they're close to winning the Champions League. I don't think they're close to Liverpool, City or Chelsea at the moment.
But Neville starts off by saying this, and you can see he's basically saying that Manchester United aren't at the level of Manchester City, Liverpool or Chelsea. So from here you would assume that by default he is critical of Solskjaer, because Manchester United, after nearly 3 years of Solskjaer's management and the big transfers that have been brought in over the last 3 years, should be at least challenging with the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea and Manchester City. And I think even Neville would concede that.
The club's different today. If this was in the immediate post-Sir Alex Ferguson aftermath, Ollie would be in massive trouble tonight. I think the club will hold the nerve. I don't think they planned for a new manager in this season. I think they'll get to the end of the season. I think they'll sit with Ollie to the end of the season. I know there'll be a massive outcry from fans, from the media, from everybody that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer should be sacked. And I can understand that after that game, 5-0. It's nowhere near good enough. That was a monstrously bad day.
But you can see here that Neville concedes that Manchester United after Fergie left is completely different to how it is now. Now what does he actually mean by this? He doesn't really go on to explain it. He does describe the board as more stable, but to me all he's describing here is a club is less ambitious than it was under Fergie. Under Fergie it was win the title, or that was a poor season, or at least get a trophy, a major trophy like the Champions League, or at the very least an FA Cup. If United didn't get any trophies throughout a season, that was considered a poor season. However, now just getting top 4 seems to be an achievement in itself, and Neville is kind of conceding this in his words without actually saying it bluntly. He then also goes on to say that he thinks the club will hold their nerve and that they haven't planned for another manager this season, and that he thinks they will probably keep Ollie until the end of the season and sit down and likely say if he's going to stay on or if they don't think he's good enough. But what this tells me is that the actual problem with Manchester United is the lack of decisive decision making. Now when Carragher talks later on, he brings up the same point that I was thinking. If you think about Chelsea last year, it's fair to say that Lampard wasn't doing terribly. He was underperforming as manager and Chelsea could have been doing a lot better, but he wasn't at that level where you think he has to get sacked. If you remember Mourinho under Chelsea, it almost became obligatory that he was sacked. Otherwise there was a possibility that Chelsea would not even make Champions League or even European football. Under Lampard that wasn't the case, but he still wasn't meeting Chelsea's standards. And what did Chelsea do? They sacked him. I don't think anyone can argue that after the season that Tuchel had, winning the Champions League and getting top 4 was the wrong decision. But what Neville is conceding here is that he and even the Manchester United board sort of have this view that it's better to just allow Solskjaer the rest of the season just to save face, just to keep up appearances, even though they know that there is no use in doing it. If they keep Solskjaer to the end of the season, they aren't going to win the Champions League. They'll probably get knocked out in the group stage or maybe even the round of 16 at best. But I can't see Manchester United under Solskjaer winning the Champions League. And in the Premier League, if they get top 4, it will probably be a mid-season. It will be an underperformance because they won't be challenging for the title, which they should have been doing this season. So what really is the point in keeping Solskjaer on till the end of the season?
I have to go and watch Manchester City live a lot, and Liverpool and Chelsea, and they're really good. And Manchester United aren't good. They're nowhere near as good. And I watched Crystal Palace on Monday night. It looked a really good performance. I want to see performance. I want to see a structured, organised performance.
So you see here that Neville is talking about Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City being really good. Well, why aren't Manchester United? And you can't really say that it's because Solskjaer's rebuilding. He's been in the job a very long time. Tuchel only came into Chelsea last year and they're already miles ahead of Manchester United. Neville then even speaks about Crystal Palace and says that he wants to see just a performance from Manchester United, a good performance, not even a good result and a performance, just a performance, which is as damning as it comes. The real question Neville has to ask is why aren't Manchester United at the level of Chelsea, Liverpool or Manchester City. It can't be because they don't have the squad. They've brought in Sancho, Varane, Ronaldo. Yes, they have McTominay and Fred, but they've had McTominay and Fred for the past 3 seasons now, and Solskjaer hasn't brought in a central midfielder. He's brought in Donny van der Beek and Jadon Sancho, who aren't even first team players for Solskjaer at the moment. So if anyone is to blame for the lack of central midfielders, it has to be Solskjaer. But even in Neville's words, it seems like he knows Solskjaer is the problem. Everything he's saying is alluding to the coaching and the manager being the problem. He's not picking out individual players. He's not talking really about the board needing a massive rebuild. So what he's saying is alluding to the fact that he does think deep down, even though he's not going to admit it, that Solskjaer is the problem. And if Solskjaer is the problem at this stage at a club like Manchester United, what is the point in waiting till the end of the season?
You can change stable for the terrified to make a change, because they're terrified to bring someone in, like they did with Van Gaal or Mourinho, and it's not a Manchester United guy. So I think the Manchester United board right now, I don't think it's a case of staying strong. I think it's a case of actually panicking. What would you do? We don't want to go back to someone coming in and doing their own thing.
Now here Carragher is making the exact point that I was thinking. Neville uses the word stable as though it's something to be proud of, as though not sacking a manager gives you kind of more virtue, as if it makes you a better board. But that really is that the case at all? What is the point in being stable and not sacking a manager if you're not achieving the results? People may criticise teams like Real Madrid and Chelsea for being trigger happy when it comes to managers, but if you just look at their results over the past 2 decades, I think they're arguably the 2 most successful teams in European football. So if the 2 most successful teams in European football are there because they're trigger happy and they keep sacking managers, is that not the right way to do it? Why would you want to keep a manager just for the sake of keeping a manager, just for holding up an image? It doesn't make any sense. After all, Manchester United are a $1 billion company. This is not an under 12s football team where you need to keep people happy. Solskjaer's on a big contract earning a lot of money, and if he can't do the job, then he shouldn't be in the job. It's that simple. But at the end, Carragher points out that the Manchester United board probably don't want someone coming in as manager and doing, as he says, their own thing. And this is exactly the case. If you think about when Mourinho was there, he was demanding transfers all the time. It seemed to be putting pressure on the board, and it seemed like the board didn't really want to go along with this. It seems like the board want to make their own transfers when they want to. It seems like they only want to bring in maybe 2 or 3 transfers a summer just to uphold appearance, and it seems like Solskjaer is going along with that. And just from how he's using players who have been signed, I think that has to be the case. I think Solskjaer is bowing down to the Manchester United board when it comes to signings. I don't think he's demanding enough, and I think he's willing to be happy to go along with what the board says if it means he can keep his job at times like this.
I actually think he's done a really good job to this point. But right at this point now, to take on Klopp, Guardiola, Tuchel, Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea, they need a better manager. When we talk about Manchester United as a team, we're comfortable by saying Fred's not good enough or McTominay's not good enough and they need a new midfield player. I don't feel too bad in terms of saying Manchester United need a better manager. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer isn't a manager for Manchester United. Now, he's done really well, and unfortunately, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will never be Jurgen Klopp, Pep Guardiola or Thomas Tuchel.
Here Carragher is making the exact point that I was thinking. When it comes to individual players like Fred or McTominay, or even if you think of pundits being critical of players like Pogba or even Ronaldo at certain times, they don't seem to hesitate in saying they're not good enough or they should be replaced or they need to do better. But when it comes to the manager, particularly with pundits, and I think it's because they are kind of in the same industry, they are ex-players and they sort of all know each other, they are reluctant to say a manager isn't good enough, even if it's blatantly clear they aren't. If you remember in the summer when Chelsea had Werner, Tammy Abraham and Giroud as their centre forwards, it seemed acceptable for pundits and critics to say that Chelsea's forward line is nowhere near the level of Manchester United, Liverpool, Manchester City. When it comes to Manchester United and their manager, it's obviously clear that Solskjaer is nowhere near the level of Klopp, Tuchel or Pep Guardiola, but for some reason Neville doesn't seem to think that that is a problem, and he doesn't seem to think that that needs improvement.
Chelsea last season changed the manager when they won the Champions League, a top-level manager.
Chelsea have a model. Chelsea have a model. I didn't want David Moyes to be sacked.
No, I'm not asking you for you to
what
ask for a manager. What I'm saying is you can't keep going back and saying, because Jose Mourinho failed, we shouldn't try and get a top manager into this club.
The reason the board will stay stable at this time and go at least to the end of the season is because of what happened with Jose Mourinho, with Louis van Gaal. They won't bring a hitman in again. A hitman that comes in and does a job for 2 years, they're not going to do that at the club again. They're going to stick with Ole till the end of the season. Ole's got to win a trophy this season, and I think they'll stick with him to the end of the season. But this is painful. Look, in any other club, he's in massive trouble tonight. In any other, to be fair, part of Manchester United's recent history, maybe, he would have been in trouble. But because of what's happened with Van Gaal and Mourinho and the change that's happened, They're not going to do that now.
But is that right because of what's happened in the past? How long are you going to keep going back to Van Gaal and Mourinho?
So here Carragher is making the perfect point. Chelsea changed managers last year, and I don't think anyone will say that that was the wrong decision. However, here it seems unclear whether Neville is speaking about what he thinks will happen or what he thinks should happen. But I do think he's conflating the two. He describes the board not being willing to bring in a hitman, as he says, a manager who's going to only win stuff for 2 or 3 seasons, and instead they want a longer term project. But I ask everyone who's a Manchester United fan, what is the point in building a longer term project if it doesn't end with trophies? It's better to bring in someone like Antonio Conte or Zinedine Zidane and actually win trophies in those 2 or 3 seasons and then look for the next manager. What is the point in building a longer term project if that longer term project is not better than the so-called hitman and it doesn't bring more trophies? It seems like an illogical thing to think about, and it seems to only be satisfying the ego of the people in charge who like to talk about building dynasties and building for the long term. But if you look at most managers' records at football clubs, there's very few managers who can build dynasties. Maybe only Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, and maybe even managers like Max Allegri, you could argue, are the only real managers who have been able to build dynasties. And as Carragher says, just because Mourinho and Van Gaal didn't work, doesn't mean you should ever not bring in a high-profile name as manager again. Think about this logically. If a centre-forward, so let's have Falcao as example, at Manchester United doesn't work out, you wouldn't say, well, Manchester United shouldn't be targeting the biggest name striker in the world. You wouldn't say that they need Danny Welbeck up front or someone like that. You would still say United need the best, and that's the same with the manager. Not all managers are the same. They have different styles. They are at different times in their career. So Neville's point about Van Gaal and Mourinho seems to not hold any water at all. And Carragher in this conversation has completely mopped the floor with him. And I think Carragher is speaking a lot of what Manchester United fans think at this point. What is the point in holding on to Solskjaer till the end of the season if you don't think he's going to turn it around? And Neville seems to not think that he's going to turn it around, especially after 3 years. If they're not at the level where they can even not lose to Liverpool 5-0 and not get completely destroyed, then how much is it really going to improve? United need a manager who's going to be winning them the Champions League and Premier League. And just by going off Solskjaer's record, particularly this season, he doesn't seem the manager and he has to go. And I think if you ask Neville deep down, does he think Solskjaer has to be sacked? With the levels of Manchester United, at the levels of Ferguson and before that, I think he would definitely say yes. But because he's on TV, he wants to be diplomatic. He will never admit that in public. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these kind of commentary videos, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you get notified when my other videos come out. Go to the description to check out some of my other videos as well as Football Factors channel as well. And follow me on Instagram and Twitter for more content.